The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Thank you for joining MediSpend's webinar, Top Qualities to Consider in an HCP Engagement Management Partner. I'd like to thank our presenters for joining us today to share this great information. A few administrative items to handle before we get started. We are recording today's webinar and we'll be sending an email in the next few days with a link to download the recording. So keep an eye on your inboxes. Also, if you have any questions during the webinar, please utilize the GoToWebinar control panel on the right side of your screen to submit your questions. We will be handling those at the end of today's webinar. Now, I would like to introduce our expert presenters today. On the line, we have Seth Houston, Chief Commercial Officer here at MediSpend, and Matt Balageron, MediSpend's Director of Solutions Engineering. Thank you again for being here today. Now I would like to hand it over to Seth to begin the presentation. Seth?
Thank you, Lauren, and thank you everybody for attending our webinar this afternoon. This has been a very hot topic in the last couple of years. As we know, many life sciences companies, which include pharmaceutical, biotech, and medical device companies, continue to see the value of partnering with the healthcare community in driving and helping drive the drug development process, get feedback on regulatory requirements, whether it's regarding clinical trials, or getting feedback from the marketplace on messaging and positioning and how you're going to promote your drugs or devices to the marketplace, and how are you going to help better educate patients out there. So I think everybody would agree that partnering with the healthcare community is extremely important. It's going to help drive awareness of our drugs and diet and devices that meet patient needs, and it's going to help us grow our business. Now, the challenge with engaging with HCPs from a paid engagement perspective is they are highly scrutinized, as we all understand. There's a lot of regulations in terms of why are you partnering with the healthcare community? What is the actual legitimate business need that you want to partner and pay consulting fees or other types of fees? And with that comes with scrutiny. So we all understand they're very important, but since they come with a lot of scrutiny, companies like yourselves are implementing systems that enable your business to compliantly plan, compliantly engage, and compliantly pay these stakeholders for activities that meet company objectives. So we're going to walk you through the top 6 qualities to consider when you are evaluating HCP engagement solutions in the marketplace. Let's start with the first one. Flexibility and configuration. Although most life sciences companies have very similar or the same policies and procedures or business processes, many of you have different policies and procedures or business processes or different approval workflows. Not every pharma company, not every biotech company, not every medical device company is the same. So it is very important for you to, when you are evaluating solutions, to ensure that there is flexibility where you can configure workflows and configure your business processes to meet your individual needs and policies and procedures in general. For example, even we work with many of our clients who have different policies and procedures or processes in North America versus Europe versus Latin America or Asia Pacific. And so you want to make sure that you can configure the solution to meet the needs of all your business units and all your regions globally. The second piece around flexibility is to make sure that the partner you're going to select has the subject matter expertise that has out-of-the-box workflows based on industry standard policies and procedures. You may have similar form fields. You may have to configure or customize different form fields based on your individual company needs or business unit needs. And the fourth piece when it comes to flexibility and configuration is to ensure that the system you're evaluating has the flexibility to integrate or interface with any third-party source system, such as a CRM system or a contract lifecycle management system or any kind of accounts payable or financial ERP system. The important is you want to make sure that you are confident that the system you're evaluating will not only meet your company-wide needs, but also meet the needs of compliance, legal, business, medical affairs, IT, and the individual needs of various regions or business units. Now, to go to the second top quality, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Matt Belageron. Matt?
Yeah, thanks, Seth. So for the second quality here, we really want to talk about and focus on ease of use. And in my mind, I may argue that this has a close, maybe a tie on the first quality there in terms of ranking. It's really important to have a solution that is very user-friendly and intuitive. And a lot of times when we're having conversations with folks from the compliance team that come to MediSpend and start evaluating what options there are for engagement solutions, the messaging that we're hearing is that there's certainly the need for a system to provide those compliance controls and oversight, but there's definitely an initiative to have a relationship and a symbiotic experience with the business, meaning that they don't want to simply prescribe a system that's there only for record keeping and policy means. It's really an effort to find a solution that the business is going to find useful and beneficial as well, meeting both needs from compliance and the business. So making sure that that system is easy to adopt, task driven. Also looking at the second pillar here, a lot of times when introducing a new system in a company, it could be overwhelming to change to a new system or to introduce a new system. And having a role-based access to a chosen engagement application is going to really make that process a lot easier. So we all know that there's a lot of different tasks and subtasks involved in the overarching engagement process, and not every user of the system has to be part of each one of those steps along the way. So if you're in the legal team and you log into the application, or you're in Med Affairs planning events and requesting payments, your experience should be built around you, and everything that's not relevant should be simply turned off and not something that will be causing that feeling of being overwhelmed. And lastly here, is there training involved with learning the new user interface and the new application? Certainly training is a necessary part of a go live, making sure that everybody's comfortable with the system and can ask as many questions as they'd like, but sustaining the need for training on an ongoing basis where each time a user needs to access the system, they're referencing a user manual or online training, that's certainly not the right approach. The interface should be intuitive. It should be something that users are going to understand when they log in, even if it's been quite a while since they had some training. It's something that they're going to be able to easily work in on an ongoing basis. And to take a look at some of these different practices in the real world, we'd like to take a moment to show you an example of that. So I'm going to move away from the PowerPoint presentation here just for a second. And what I have on my screen right now is a demonstrative environment here of MediSpend's Engagement Manager. And initially, upon logging in, the things that I'd like to bring to your attention are the fact that the available features and functionality are based on the user who's logged into the system. So again, all items that wouldn't be relevant to this user's role are simply not activated for that user. I don't have to worry about being confused by or stumbling upon functionality that isn't something I need to be worried about. From an ease of use perspective, there's a clear create new button. My objective today may be to go in and make a new engagement request for an advisory board and route that through the approval workflow. Takes all the guesswork out of where I go to initiate that process here under the create new menu, and I'll choose the record type engagement that I'd like to create. On the records themselves, you'll notice that the fields are laid out in a very easy to understand way. Also consider fields that you need or don't need for this type of request on this record. There's an ability to make those configurations, and that could be varying across a larger global organization in particular, where, let's say in the US, we want to capture the product or products that this advisory board is going to pertain to, whereas our counterparts in Europe may not have any need to capture that detail for their engagements. Therefore, we can have it show up via our business rules for the US team, but not for the European team. Again, making sure that we're only capturing the details that we need. And from an end user perspective, everything is clear in what I need to provide for details. I'll also point out here collaborators. Oftentimes there'll be more than one owner of a record or planner in this case. Perhaps Seth and I are working collaboratively on this advisory board, and that allows us to both have the visibility and access to this record as we're creating the request, but also as it moves through the approval process. And that accounts for scenarios where maybe I'm out of the office next week. Seth can pick up on the record if it gets approved on Monday, and it's not going to have to wait until the following week when I return to the office. So I'll save the record, and this is going to expose now the workflow button. Again, another ease of use. I think of this as the easy button, if you will. The folks that need to review and approve this record might change based on the event type I'm planning, the region I'm in, or other factors. And from a business user perspective, I don't need to be aware of or care about that, quite frankly. I can have the system take care of all of that for me from an intelligent assignment in that configurable workflow. By choosing the button, I'm able to route my record into the workflow. And as I submit the record, I also, on my side as the business user, have transparency into where this record is. I don't have to start picking up the phone and calling around to try to figure out who has the record or where it is in the process. Natively on the record, I see it's in review. But jumping back to the home page here, this is showing an area where all of those records that I have in the review workflow are easily accessible, so I can track their status independently and from a self-service perspective. Maybe something got kicked back to me. There's a question, or I might have not provided enough detail on one of my requests. All of those items returned to me are under my task, my next actionable items. And all the other records I'm working on are also easily queued up here under pending workflow submission. The last thing I'll say here is from an intuitiveness perspective, alerts and systematic notifications are really handy, particularly in the case where I might have had an engagement, but there hasn't yet been a request for payment. There can be a system alert provided to me to nudge me along, if you will, guided through the remaining steps of that engagement lifecycle. Similarly, if there are records that are in place, let's say a contract that is coming up for expiration on one of the doctors, Dr. Gold that I commonly engage with, I can get an advance notification proactively that agreement is coming up for expiration. So I'm not running into the reactive scenario of trying to plan an engagement and then realizing that Dr. Gold's contract has been expired. So my hope is as we do this quick walkthrough and showcase here inside of Engagement Manager, it's really keying in on some of those aspects of that ease of use. So at this time, what I'll do is go back into our presentation, and I'm going to resume and hand things back over to Seth for our third quality.
Thanks, Matt. I think the first quality we talked about was flexibility and configuration, and that is a benefit and a top quality for everyone in your organization, every business unit, every business stakeholder, and IT professional. The second one around intuitive and easy to use is more beneficial for the business. They're the ones that are actually planning, engaging, and executing the engagements. And we all know that if business users don't find it intuitive, do not find it easy to use, well, they're simply not going to use it. And we want everybody to use the system in order to ensure that you're planning the right engagements and complying with those matters. Now, the third thing from a compliance perspective is, well, we just talked about what benefits everybody. We talked about what benefits the business end users who are using the system, but compliance has needs as well. And what keeps them up at night is that they want to make sure that there are embedded compliance controls hidden or embedded within the system so that any business unit that is planning these engagements is automatically following company policies and procedures, automatically following business processes, and ensuring all these high-risk activities are being planned in a compliant fashion. So you're going to want to make sure that there is a legitimate business need in the form of a needs assessment that compliance can review and approve. You want to make sure that there's legal oversight of all the interactions and descriptions of the engagements, primarily around how much you're going to pay for these engagements, that there's a fair market value associated with them. Finance also wants to make sure, as well as compliance, that there are payment controls to ensure that anything that you are going to pay is not over what you already had in contract or more than what is the fair market value rate associated with that activity. You want to make sure that there is a document control, that all of the interactions, all the phases and steps are contained within the system in case there's an audit. And furthermore, you want to have embedded insights and analytics that help the compliance team more proactively monitor risk, while also helping the business team make more informed business decisions. So compliance has an interest. They want to make sure there's embedded controls. That is a top quality that is extremely important, along with our flexibility and configuration of the overall system, as well as the ease of use of the system. And with that, I'll turn it back over to Matt to talk about our fourth top quality.
Great, thanks, Seth. And a good segue from the last topic that Seth had covered there from his quality analytics. So insights and analytics, commonly we hear that this is nice to have from folks that we're talking with that are looking for systems and solutions. My opinion, this should be a foundational aspect of the solution that you're seeking. The insights and analytics really come in the benefit of taking all of the data flowing through this central application that's tying your end-to-end engagement process together, along with disparate systems like your payment system, contract management system, CRM, and placing all of that valuable information into one database where we could tap in and provide insights and monitoring on all of that valuable information. So a couple of good examples here. We'll talk a lot with folks that come to us and say that they have a manual-based process, a lot of forms that are filled out, and they have a pretty well-oiled policy and procedure. But for example, their annual needs assessment or annual plan is on a PDF document that's approved, in Q4 of the former year or previous year, placed on a SharePoint folder, and then rarely referenced throughout that upcoming year as engagements are actually happening that tie back to that overarching plan. If you're having quarterly reviews of that plan, getting any sort of statistics on actuals is oftentimes a headache. It's a manual job to go into different systems, your contracting system, your ERP, trying to run reports and put things together to really get that understanding. So insights is definitely an area where we're able to provide live-time dashboards that help alleviate that need for manual reporting and really add to the benefit of doing those annual plans altogether. Other areas as well, we hear a lot of times that there's a rough understanding of the number of agreements that are out there within an organization, but little understanding of the actual engagements that are happening under those agreements. Are they being overutilized, underutilized? How do you keep an eye on contract caps? What do we know we've paid an actual HCP in a given time period? So these dashboards are critical in helping make all of that reporting not only a reality, but something that is automatic and in live time. So what I'd like to do here is actually take another glimpse into the system where we'll show some of those examples of the dashboards and insights available. So again, I'll move into my demo environment here, and I'll reference our insight menu to first pull up our accruals dashboard. So the first sort of story I told you there about a company that has an annual plan in place, but it's a document on a SharePoint folder. Now with insights in a system that's actively facilitating the entire engagement process, you can have an accruals funnel in live time and understand what your plan was versus where you actually are at in that given time period. So this helps with those quarterly reviews. You might have an annual plan for a series of advisory boards for the entire calendar year. In June, you might be under that plan. Oftentimes you may be over that plan, but with this dashboard, you can actually pinpoint exactly where you're at and make the appropriate pivots and adjustments that are needed. And thinking about subsequent planning for the year, let's say 2024, you could look back historically at the previous years of data to use data-driven estimations, which really start to get your planning much more dialed in. From a monitoring perspective, I'll jump into a couple of dashboards here. One, our HCP overview dashboard would show a record of all of those HCPs that you vetted to be engaged with across the organization. So oftentimes there'll be KOL management on ensuring that all of our HCPs, those KOLs we're engaging with, are run through some sort of screening or sanctions process. We've looked at their background and qualifications, and compliance has approved an hourly rate for them to actually utilize. This dashboard shows that entire pool of HCPs in one glance. That could be filtered by business unit, region, down to a specific HCP, but this also lets you look at volumes. How many of those qualification records do we have out there? How many have been recently approved? And how many exception rates, or I've heard it called an appeal, which I enjoy as well, on an HCP maybe asking for more from an hourly perspective than compliance had initially approved. You can track the volume of those exceptions or appeals, how many have been approved, and you can even filter that down by various business units or other attributes like region. Those exact records are also referenceable from a detailed view. So we have the high-level dashboard, but with one system, you could select the actual record itself to be brought into that full profile to do an easy drill down into that data and information. You can also extract this type of detail out of the interface, share and distribute these dashboards, and permission them appropriately for native access as well. And the last dashboard that I'll leave you all with here is our HCP usage monitoring example, where this really helps to answer the question, which HCPs are we engaging with and where are they at in terms of the contract cap? So we have high-level statistics, of course, where you can have aggregate numbers on total contracted hours, number of activities or engagements, but you can also look at a detailed view at an HCP level based on the agreements or agreement they have in place, how many hours we've contracted at, and how many have we engaged or paid at to get a percentage, a contract cap monitor. Now, you might be looking closely and paying attention here, James Fauci, well over that contract cap. Certainly monitoring helps to spot those occurrences, but I would add layering in business rules within an engagement solution can also proactively and systematically prevent that overage from ever even happening. A couple of other insights here: paid dollars by month, year over year, comparing historical data with present data also is valuable to see if there are any unexpected outliers or vast changes from a time period previous. And then also an easy way to look at total amounts paid to HCPs in a given time period. You might actually set up a threshold where you would have a fiscal limit on what you would pay a particular HCP in a given year or time period. These types of reports allow for that monitoring and reporting to happen in real time as well, to keep track of that. We'll hear commonly that maybe we're aware of the engagements that a particular HCP is having with the Med Affairs team, but it was completely unknown that they were also being engaged by the product team for some consulting. These types of dashboards and reports really put that all in one picture for the appropriate folks to be monitoring and reporting on. So again, insights, in my view, a foundational aspect when looking at engagement solution and partner out there. With that, I'll go back into our presentation and pass it on to Seth for the next quality.
So far, the first four qualities we summarized were specifically around the technology and the solution itself. But what is equally important is that the solution provider, your vendor, your partner also have the subject matter expertise that can not only provide best practices on how to properly implement, migrate, or perform change management to a new solution, but they should also have the subject matter expertise that provide you the compliance advisory or guidance that you require globally. a partner that understands the regulations and the HCP engagement rules by country, and understands all the various laws. So that this way they can help you identify what are the right ways to configure the system to meet your workflows and your business processes, but also have the overall subject matter expertise that you can lean on. Too many times you may hire a third-party system integrator or technology developer that simply builds good technology, and then they support it, they leave you, and now they don't provide that subject matter expertise, someone that you can pick up the phone and call and get some guidance for. So this is equally as important outside of the technology, to select a partner that truly does understand the HCP engagement ecosystem, not only from a technology perspective, but also from a compliance and legal perspective. And I think going hand in hand with subject matter expertise would be our sixth and final top quality. And with that, I'll turn that over to Matt again.
Great, thanks, Seth. And certainly a good combination, experience and then white glove client service and support. So here are some things to think about. How confident are you that the chosen partner can provide best practices based on similar organizations as your own? So I think to unpack that a little bit, it's really important that there isn't just one playbook, one size fits all approach. Every organization is going to be unique, have different objectives, and having a partner that has been there and done that with organizations that are similar to you is really important. Thinking about whether or not help desk support is provided around the world. So a lot of times there's some concerns validly about rolling out a solution, particularly from a global perspective, the change management that comes along with that, ensuring users feel like they're supported, they can reach out and get some assistance when needed. That help desk is going to be a crucial aspect of that support, to not only go through the initial rollout and hypercare periods, but in an ongoing support perspective as well. And maybe tying back to the first quality that Seth covered, when we think about help desk here, we also don't want to be looking at help desk as the only way to get a minor configuration completed. So are there aspects of the application that empower users at your own company to be under an admin rule or to have control over the application without having to depend on opening up a support ticket for every little thing? So it's great to have that support desk, but let it not be the only way to kind of get things done in a system. Also, just tying things back to that configurability that Seth covered in quality one. Are they just a vendor or a true compliance partner? So the things that I think of in this realm are, the investment that the chosen partner has in your success. Do they know your specific goals and objectives? And do they have the team, the named team identified for you to be working with from the kickoff call into go live and hypercare and onward into the relationship? Oftentimes, what we're seeing here at MediSpend is that there's a named executive steering committee that's also involved to provide that level of leadership on our end in combination with your company to provide that joint success as we would go into a go live and beyond stage. What do their clients say about them? I think this is an area where it's crucially important to make sure that you have an ability to reach out to clients that they have today, ideally clients that match your company or your organization's profile, to be able to have that conversation and understand in the real world what it's like to work with them and what it's like to use their solution or software as well, equally as important. But that client reference is something that should definitely be available and welcomed by the person or entity rather that you're evaluating. And are they committed to your success by striving to exceed those service level agreements? So it's important to have the SLAs in place to understand their commitment, but do they go above and beyond? Oftentimes here at MediSpend, our support team is really on the ball and answering support requests and picking up the phone and really providing that white glove support that goes above and beyond what we have as already really committed SLAs with our existing clients. And lastly here, a little saying to leave you with: don't let go live mean goodbye. So I've heard a lot of times from organizations that we're speaking with, my personal experience in my career with certain applications and providers out there, where it's great that we've just gone live, and then it's sort of, you know, at the end of the term, and the renewal is coming back around, and all of a sudden you get a call and the outreach starts to happen. That really shouldn't be the case. It should be an ongoing partnership. Communication should be set up at a cadence that makes sense for you, but is also flexible on the part of that chosen partner, where there could be a monthly check-in, quarterly business reviews, or maybe during certain periods of time, for whatever reason, there needs to be conversations happening, excuse me, a couple of times a month or on a weekly basis. So making sure that there's that flexibility there, and again, that investment in your success as well. So with that, it rounds out our 6 qualities. I'd like to pass it back to Seth once again. I think he's going to give us some good summarization here and some good takeaways to consider.
Thank you, Matt. The key message here is really adhering to compliance. It doesn't have to be difficult. There are built for purpose solutions out in the marketplace that have been out in the marketplace for 4, 5, 6 years. Vendors and partners have a handful, a number of dozens of clients that they can leverage their subject matter expertise and best practices to relate to you. So just to summarize what the 6 qualities are, the first 4 that we talked about were primarily centered around the technology. Want to make sure that your system is flexible in terms of configuring workflows, configuring your business processes to meet your company's overall objectives and policies and procedures. Because not every company is the same. Believe it or not, probably when we do implementations and we do requirements gathering, the requirements are probably 70% similar, if not the same, and the other 30% are pretty unique. And when we say that to some of our clients, they're actually surprised, because they feel, well, we came from the same industry, we all know each other, we basically have the same policies and procedures, but you'd be surprised how even within one company they change based on the different business units. So you want to make sure the system is highly configurable, that you're not spending a lot of time and money doing customizations that are going to be costly in maintaining. You want a solution that you can configure, make changes, you can always adopt to new policies and procedures, and you can deploy it in a timely fashion to your stakeholders. The second thing we talked about is ease of use. If business stakeholders do not adopt it and do not use it, the overall system will not provide the benefits you expect from it. So you want to make sure that when you look at a system, think about how an end user will log in and complete a needs assessment, look at fair market value, route a business plan or engagement plan to various stakeholders, respond to those questions, begin the contracting process, submit payment, and then obviously look at the insights and analytics, which is really the third top quality. You'd be surprised how many of our clients are driving new ways of analyzing data that is being contained in Engagement Manager. The business teams really want to understand, what information can I gather to make more informed business decisions? Who are the HCPs that we're not utilizing that may have the best subject matter expertise out there? Who are the KOLs? What kind of patient education presence do they have? How can they help us with our patient education initiatives? Compliance wants to make sure that I want to know that everybody's using the system, and I want to make sure that there's not a lot of training associated with it, because I want quick adoption. The third thing, top quality, is compliance says, well, we need embedded compliance controls, because if we do not have those controls in place, there's always risk when we're planning and paying these healthcare practitioners lots of money for these activities that meet our objectives. And the fourth thing we talked about is insights and analytics. Those first four are technology. But as I mentioned earlier on, equally as important is not just a technology vendor or partner, but a trusted advisor that has the subject matter expertise and provides global client service and help desk support, not just in the US, but also in countries in Asia, throughout Europe, Latin America. You want a company that has global chops, that has the experience, that's done this for many years. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for joining our webinar. I will ask Lauren if we did receive any questions from the audience, and if so, Matt and I will be happy to answer them.
Hey guys, thank you so much for that presentation and for all the information you guys just shared. Before we get to those questions, I did want to very quickly mention to everybody on the phone that there is a MediSpend perspectives piece that outlines the qualities to consider that Seth and Matt just went over. The perspective piece actually has even more details under each quality, so we highly recommend downloading that piece of content. It is available right now under the GoToWebinar control panel under the handouts section. You're also very much welcome to reach out to us to receive a copy as well. So either way that you want to download it, we just think that it has even more great information than what we shared in our presentation today. So we did get some questions in, absolutely. Our first question that we have here, and Seth, I think you touched on it a little bit, is are there vast differences in policies and procedures? Or are there similarities across different companies, maybe within the same industries?
There aren't vast differences, but there are differences, and there are a lot of similarities. When we just look at pharmaceutical in general, the similarities, it's probably more like 80% of policies and procedures are similar. When you look at medical device companies, it's probably 60 to 70%. It's not as similar as pharma, and biotech probably groups in well with the pharma side. But what we've noticed is the way companies are going to market with their sales and marketing efforts continue to change. There's a lot more online presence as opposed to face-to-face presence. There aren't reps and MSLs visiting 8 HCPs a day, or from an MSL perspective, 10 healthcare institutions a week as it was 3, 4, 5 years ago. They're using a lot more digital means and video conferencing and other communication channels. And that has created some changes in policies and procedures to kind of address the new way to go to market. But I would say in general, definitely not vast differences. There are a lot of similarities, but the one thing I do want to mention, and I think I mentioned this earlier on, is we've worked with both pharma and medical device that the policies and procedures are not consistent across the entire company. They are different in Europe because of data privacy. So there's the policies and procedures are very different. Needs assessment requirements are different that we found in Europe than they are in the US, as an example. But that's the importance when you when you're looking at vendors or looking at partners. Equality is, do they have the subject matter expertise? Can they provide that know-how? Can they serve up best practices? And that is, one of the top qualities that we mentioned earlier on.
Awesome, thank you, Seth. So we also have another question here. So we have an in-house system everyone is used to. There's a fear of this being a huge change management undertaking. How would you address that?
Another good question. I'll start. I'm sure Matt has probably more experience working directly with the client implementations than I do, but I've sat on enough of the committees to give you an idea. What you don't want to do is you don't want to boil the ocean. You don't want to try to solve all the needs of all your global stakeholders at once. You may want to start with a region. You may want to crawl first, then start to walk. And then once you're walking very strongly, then you can start to run and really roll something out globally. But you want to include committees that have a participation from medical affairs, business, whether it's marketing, event management that plans conferences and events. You want legal, you want compliance, you want all the stakeholders in a committee to talk about the specific needs that you're looking for, and then how to roll this out to the teams. Training is important. Putting together a migration plan is extremely important. And again, I'll reiterate, a top quality is ensuring that you have a partner that has the experience in doing that and that can help with the change management process. I don't know, Matt, if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a good response to that concern. It's a concern that a lot of organizations have, whether it's the replacement of a system or the introduction of a system for maybe a smaller organization that's just looking to get ahead of the curve. I think you touched on the migration part. I've seen that be an integral part of success, where if there are existing annual plans and contracts and qualifications, you certainly want that information to be preceded as part of implementation, so that the day that you do go live, it's not going to be an empty tank and users are going to have to spin up every record request from scratch and sometimes redundantly. We want this to be a very smooth transition. Doing so in a phased approach, maybe starting with one particular region and moving it on to a more broad global basis is something to consider. And the last thing that comes to mind as well is everybody really loves integrations. I'm a huge fan myself. The more automation there is, oftentimes there's more benefit, yet trying to get all of that stood up as you introduce a solution is not always the right approach. So to have a system that can adapt to those integrations as time goes on and as they're needed is something that is also key to be aware of from a flexibility perspective, to ensure that success of standing up a new system and easing that worry and concern that people validly have around the change management aspects.
Awesome. Thanks, Seth and Matt. We have a great comment here from Bill Friedrich, who, if you guys are around the conference circuit, I'm sure you've seen Bill around, but he left a comment here that I think is very important, that the needs assessment is important because the feds are looking at that as a basis as to why companies do these events. And your needs assessment forms can be stored in Engagement Manager, and I'm sure that's a piece of equality that you should be looking at when it comes to sort of an engagement management solution. But Seth and Matt, I don't know if you have any other comments to add on to what Bill said.
Yeah, I mean, I think that totally makes sense. The other thing that I just thought of is sitting at some of the conferences the last year, and the Department of Justice has spoken, and the Department of Justice has said repeatedly that if you have access to the data and you're not proactively looking at it, you're doing yourselves a disservice, and you can't plead ignorance of saying, I did not know, just because you didn't look at it. They know if you have the data, it's in-house, and therefore you should be proactive in looking at information. So if you know, we get these comments or questions a lot that from compliance saying, look, we can't allow the business to look at this report. And Department of Justice and other regulators will say, I don't know if that's a good idea, because you need to proactively monitor these activities, and if you see something, you need to address it quickly. Pleading ignorance is not going to work. So it kind of complements what Bill is saying. I mean, you know, the Department of Justice, they're going to look at needs assessments, but they're also going to look at the data, and they're also going to know that you have access to the same data that they have, and definitely want to take advantage of all the insights and analytics that are derived from the systems.
Awesome, thank you. And we do have time for one more question here. And obviously, if there are any questions we don't get to, we will follow up with you directly. Or if there are any questions you think of after this webinar, please reach out to us. We're glad to answer any questions you might have. But we have one here. You didn't mention aggregate spend reporting. So these engagements ultimately lead to spend we'd need to report. How would that integration work? And I think we probably answer that pretty well, right, Seth?
My gosh, I think we should add that as the seventh quality. that's a miss on Matt and I's part. That is a great, I don't know whoever sent that question is, that is a great comment or question. That is true. All these paid engagements are transfers of value, and depending on what country they took place in, you got to report it. If there is a law, if you're part of FPA. So I would say maybe we have to rewrite this. The 7th top quality would be have it automatically be able to integrate into your aggregate spend transparency reporting system. And I guess from our end, our transparency system, and I think many know that we're known for that. Our platform and system is the same as our engagement manager system. It's one unified platform. Some of our clients use both and do the whole thing end to end. Some of them, use engagement manager. Some of them just use transparency. But that is a great comment. Didn't think of that.
Awesome. Well, that's all the time we have right now for today. I'd like to thank Seth and Matt again for coming and presenting this information. Again, don't forget about that handout that we have in GoToWebinar that has even more details than this presentation had. And we will be sending out a recording of this webinar in the next couple of days. So just keep an eye on your inboxes and you will see the link to download the recording. But for now, everyone have a great rest of your day, and we thank you very much for attending.